Hello and welcome to another episode of This Much is True Crime with me, Martin Frizell, and my colleague, Emeritus Professor of Criminology, David Wilson. Hello, David.
Hello, how are you, Martin?
I'm good. You've had a busy week, haven't you?
Yeah, been filming quite a lot for an Australian broadcasting company in Stroud in Gloucestershire about a man called Simon Rochford, who I think over the next few months we're going to hear a lot more about. Simon Rochford moved to Australia and was committed to murders in Australia. And the Australian broadcasting company were just trying to see what crimes he might have been responsible for in Gloucestershire before he moves to Australia. And my gosh, is there a story there, Martin, that I'm sure we're going to hear a lot about and talk about on this podcast.
So he's what? Is he a serial killer? Is that that's what comes out of it?
I've got absolutely no doubt he's a serial killer, and a lot of the documentary is about those people that he is likely to have murdered in Stroud and in other places that he moved to prior to going to Australia in the mid 1990s. So I think we have got another serial killer that we
And is
should
this
be
around about the time of Fred and Rosemary West? I mean, a case I know well. I stood at that house for long enough. But is this the whole kind of Gloucester police again?
Yeah, it's exactly the case. I remember when the Australians put up the timeline for me of where he was living. Because here's the thing, I've held my hands up in the documentary and said, I'd never heard of this man. I had no idea who Simon Rochford was. And then when they approached me and showed me the timeline, I was like, crikey, I've never heard of this guy. What was he doing in Stroud in Gloucestershire in the early 1990s? And there are a number of unsolved murders which fit with the pattern of what he was doing in Australia. And of course, you're quite right. This is the Gloucestershire Police. This is Fred and Rose West. And we know that they were caught after they had killed a significant number of young women.
Well, when it comes out, we must do it on our podcast, and that sounds a great one. Just as well, I'm not saying we're ever going to put ads on our podcast or anything as mucky as that. Who knows, we might. But here's an ad for us, which is your own tour. How's it going? Any more tickets you want to flog?
You're so nice. You are just so nice. That's really sweet. We added a few more dates. We had to add a second date in Edinburgh, and we also added a date in Bowness. And we've announced the dates in a number of other dates in the south of England. So the tour is selling really well. It's sold out in 4 venues. And so, yeah, it's going really well, which I think also tells us something about people being interested in true crime, doesn't it? Because they're coming to hear me talk about a history of Britain and 20 murders. And so it's that sense of why, what can murder tell us about the culture in which we live? And so I'm delighted. And, you've been very kind asking me, how's Fiona's book selling? How are you doing?
Well, thank you to people who may just be joining us or who have been with us since we started a few months ago. Thank you for all the very kind messages and lovely words of support. It really means a lot. It's doing incredibly well, which is great. And it's for her, pretty much. It was a vehicle for her to give her a purpose. And she's delighted. I'm sort of trying to update her most days as to where it's going. And I think as we're recording, I've just been told by the publisher, it looks like it's either number 2 or number 1 in this weekend's Sunday Times bestseller list. So that's just fantastic.
Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. And by the way, I thought you were incredibly moving on Newsnight. So keep up what you're doing in terms of raising awareness of Alzheimer's. I know you don't want to be the poster boy for Alzheimer's.
No, I don't. I mean, I've got one more thing to do in August on Loose Woman, and then that's it. And the book sort of speaks for itself. And we kind of move on and let other people, take up the cudgels, which, my God, I don't know how, we're going to make much of a difference. But I think as a snapshot in time of where we are and what we need, I think it does the business. And now it's up to others to take it on. But it allows me to get back to kind of what I love, which is this, and which is true crime. And I had a boss, an old boss, who always came out with the phrase, "You couldn't make it up," when he came across a great story. And I read this just 2 days ago, and I thought, this isn't real. You can't make this up, but it is real. And this is the case of prolific burglar Dorian Puka, who's 28 years old, from Albania. And it leads into the bigger question of, in particular, Albanians and Albanian gangsters and what we do with them. And he's an Albanian who cannot be deported. And he's been taunting the Home Office with the personalised number plate of his new car. He's been convicted of theft twice and deported twice, but he's part of the what they call the Boomerang gang. He comes back in again, and he somehow manages to come back in again, and he's, as I said, taunting, flaunting himself on TikTok, on social media, around London, in Knightsbridge, on holiday in Cornwall. And I mentioned he's got a personalised number plate. That was in a Mercedes. The latest thing he's put up on TikTok, David, is he's alleging, or certainly suggesting, he's bought a £200,000 Lamborghini. Now, this is a man who is waiting. He's claiming asylum. I don't know what his claim is, why he thinks he needs asylum. But these people are playing the system because it will take maybe 2-3 years for this to go through the system, in which case he's at liberty. He's here.
Absolutely true. And if can I just point out though, if you went onto his TikTok, I noticed, as I did today as well, he only has 2,200 followers, and so undoubtedly he's attracting the attention of some sections of the media who are kind of using him in a broader way, aren't they? They're not really that concerned about Dorian Puka. They're concerned about our immigration system. They're concerned about our asylum process. And nor was he actually taunting the Home Office. He seemed to be taunting Nigel Farage, because Farage has made a number of statements about Albanians over the past week, 10 days, which are being countered by Albania's President Edi Rama. So for me, Puka is one of those people who are a bogeyman, but let's not give him the publicity that he so desperately craves. He only has about 2,000 followers actually following what he's doing with his Mercedes or his Lamborghini.
But a bogeyman to me, when growing up in Glasgow, don't know if you would think the same. A bogeyman to me was a ghost kind of like character. It was like, oh, someone to be scared of. Didn't actually exist. Almost like the abominable snowman that was a bogeyman. But this character exists. Nigel Farage, who you mentioned, he's called him, well, he's a wrong'un. But you're right, he's typical of the system that is not working, that gets under the noses and the skin of a lot of people in this country who are just seeing him flaunting what he's got and saying, you can't catch me, or more to the point, you can't deport me.
Well, you can't deport him because he has a pending asylum case that has to be decided. And of course, we are a country that follows the rule of law. We're a country that has due process. And just because Dorian Puka is, a bit of a wanker, actually, that shouldn't mean to say that we avoid the legal system that we have and say, well, he's actually got under our skin so much, we're going to ignore due process and just deport him back to Albania again. I think actually his audience for his TikTok, his audience for that conspicuous consumption is in fact other Albanians, isn't it? That's who he seems to be attracting to follow him.
But you can understand why people will be angry at this. Not just him, but for some reason, well, the Albanians, it's a fact, they are the biggest group in Britain's jails of foreigners. And I know that we are starting to deport. This Labour government is deporting more of them than certainly the previous government did. So that's underway. But they have almost ingrained themselves into the criminal underworld in this country and other countries too, but specifically here with what was cocaine. But now I see they're running cannabis as well, which is, arguably an even bigger gig for them.
I've got no doubt. I've got no doubt that Albanians are taking over a lot of the organized crime related particularly to cocaine in this country. And I've seen that firsthand because of the work that I've done as a criminologist, but also in the current series of In the Footsteps of Killers, which, as you know, I present on Channel 4. I looked at the case of Georgina Garsala, and it was quite clear, and she's from Brighton, and it was quite clear that it was Albanian organized criminal gangs that were controlling that drugs trade in the city. So I've got no doubt that there are problems in relation to Albanians who are seem to be taking control of a lot of the organized crime groups in the inner city. However, one of the things that I guard against is being caught up in, the kind of game that I think some sections of the media and some politicians would like us to play. I mean, for example, I found it very hard to stand up the number 1 in 50 of all Albanians in Britain is in prison. I've really tried hard to stand that up, and I can't. I know it's come from the Daily Telegraph. I looked at things that were being said by Edi Rama, Albania's prime minister, and I looked at figures that were produced by the Albanian embassy, and that figure, 1 in 50, is based on there only being 53,000 Albanians living in the United Kingdom. And that can't be true, and is being denied by the Albanian embassy, who say, look, there's double that number, and that's an underestimate. So sometimes there's an agenda that's going on here, Martin, and I don't think but I think there's a real problem. The real problem is organized criminal gangs centered on the Albanians, and people like Puka are, just a kind of goon in terms of what we should be thinking about in terms of getting them deported.
But some of these people being deported are just, as I said, they're boomerangs coming straight back. Some of them will be on the small boats. They will be young men. They've thrown their whatever papers they had have gone. And so they get here. And again, it's playing the game. Listen, whether it's Albanians, Romanians, Syrians, Afghans, whoever it may be, Somalians who come here, some of them or a lot of them seem to be playing the game in the sense that I've got no papers, so I know it's going to take quite a while for you to work out who I am. And in the meantime, I'll do what I'm here for. Now, some of them may well have been told to come back because there is a job for them in the underworld.
Again, all of that I perfectly believe to be true. I think that is actually occurring. But I looked at details related to small boats arriving this year, and there were. Do you know how many small boats arrived on the 15th of July?
If it was good weather, it could, in terms of numbers of people on the boats, it could be several hundred who came. I think one day there was maybe more than 500 or 600 and came across together. What is it? 20 boats? Tell me how many boats?
None. Do you know how many small boats came over on the 16th of July? None. Do you know how many small boats came over on the...
But David, that could be the weather. That's just the weather.
No, the weather, remember, was incredibly good last week. All I'm trying to say is we spend an inordinate amount of time discussing when some small boats come over, and we spend no time at all discussing when the fact that none of those small boats come over. And then the bigger issues seem to me, of all the people who do come over on small boats, the 6 most common nationalities were Iranian, Afghanistani, Iraqi, Syrian, Eritrean, and then Albanian. And 70% of those who made the crossing were granted asylum. So,
but how many thousands are still waiting to have it processed?
again, well, the figures are really hard to track down through how the government tabulates them. Exactly. And so I would love to be able to answer your question, but I can't. And that's partly because I found it so difficult to get the information that I was seeking. But 70% of those people coming over on a small boat are being granted asylum. I'd also say that mine was a serious point. I started to look at the numbers of people who were being returned who were being pushed out, as it were, forcibly returned every week from Britain. And it's forcible returns were 157 people per week, and over 650 people were being returned to their country of origin per week. So some of those people weren't being forcibly returned, they were being returned for other reasons. But all I'm saying is we spend an inordinate amount of time worrying about the Dorian Pukas of this world, but we don't actually see the whole picture. And I do want the whole picture. I want to know, well, if I'm Afghani or Iraqi, well, I can understand why I would want to come to Britain, where there is a rule of law, where there is a functioning state. I can understand that. If people from Albania are coming just to commit crime, then of course we should deport them. And Dorian Puka is a goon, an example of that process. But he does not tell the whole picture of Albanians in this country, and nor do the Albanians coming over on small boats tell the whole picture of people coming over in small boats.
Does he, though? Does he kind of hide behind the European Convention on Human Rights or the Refugee Convention, where, even if you're a criminal, you still have rights to be a refugee?
Yeah, he is using that system. He is quite clearly using the system, because once he's denied asylum, he can appeal the decision. If he appeals the decision, that goes to the Ministry of Justice, and therefore we're involving lawyers, and they're applying a legal due process in terms of assessing his case. And by and large, I think the time span was 15 months was what I read. So, you said 2-3 years. I think it's come down because of the investment that's gone into the Ministry of Justice recently to deal with asylum claims. But yeah, it's awful. But don't allow us to surrender our values because of people like him. Our values are one in which we are a country that values the rule of law and has due process. We can't pick and choose who should be allowed due process, Martin, can we?
No, but it's when you live in a big city like London, as I do certainly, and you go into the center of town and you don't wear your watch, you don't take your phone out. There are areas, even normal areas of London where you wouldn't dream of going to now, or you're riding your bike in the morning and all of a sudden, you're kind of ambushed and someone takes your bike, or my car sitting outside, stolen middle of the night. No one can trace it. No one cares. There's an insurance number. It does, and apologies if I'm getting paranoid about it, but it does feel as if, it's all loaded against the citizen. Basically, we do what we do. We pay our taxes. We pay the fines if I get into a yellow box and whatever it is, or if I go down to a bus lane, I pay the fine, whatever it is. But there seem to be other people who can get away with it. And as we've just been saying, play the system.
Well, I'm definitely not going to use the phrase moral panic, because I've always disliked that phrase in criminology, because, well, because moral panic is always about a disproportionate response to something that is felt to be endangering people or British values. So I'm not going to use that phrase, because what would be a proportionate response to the circumstances that you've just described? I mean, it's wrong that you feel that you can't wear your watch when you're going into the centre of town.
Or if I don't feel safe. It's the first time living in London, I don't feel safe. I live on the edge of a big common. I wouldn't dream of walking through it at night time. I used to. I wouldn't dream of doing that now. You look around you all the time. You're just very conscious. Anybody at any point could, I'm not picking out any particular nationality, because there's a lot of them out there that could, clearly, and British criminals as well, whether it's shoplifting or theft or mugging, whatever it is, it just seems to be everywhere now.
Well, and that's why I think moral panic as a concept was always rather difficult, because I believe that people like yourself in your community should be able to assess how you feel living in that community if things change. As you know, my next book is called A History of Britain and 20 Murders, 1885 to the present day. And there is a dominant trope in British history, whether we're talking about 1885 or indeed what we've been talking about today. And that trope is Britain is going to hell in a handcart. Everything is in decline. And the reason why we're going to hell in a handcart and the decline is occurring is because we other a particular group of people at a particular time. In 1885, the group that was othered were Irish. They were seen as coming over from mainland Ireland, and they were Catholics, and they didn't work, they got drunk, or whatever it was that was the fashion of the high Victorian period. They criticized Irish people. If you move through British history, it's the same. Every single decade produces this trope. We're in decline, and the decline is because of something othering what British values are. And yet, even today, you were saying about a fear, which I accept. You know, there is a genuine fear. I very rarely hear it described that Britain is still the sixth largest economy in the world. I very rarely hear it described that 8 of our universities are in the top 100 universities in the world. I very rarely hear it described that we have one of the, despite all the problems it faces, one of the best healthcare systems in the world. We tend to, in Britain, always see there being a problem with Britain, and that trope is used time after time after time, whether we're talking about the Irish in 1885 or indeed Dorian Puka and his Albanian mates in 2025.
And I only mention the Albanians the way I am doing because, you know, police have been telling people when you've had things, or we've had things stolen in the past, it's the police that say it's an Albanian gang. Now, whether it is or not, you know, whether they're making it up or they're covering themselves, I don't know. But it's become, you know, it's not folklore because we've seen them being arrested and charged and convicted and sent back to Albania, and back they come again. But I know what you're saying, David, but I think it's different now in terms of I don't know anyone who hasn't been burgled pretty much. You know, it's rife. And, you know, how many people are caught who have broken into your house? A bit like, you know, Mr. Puka, he was a prolific thief, or whoever gets their car back, or who finds their watch, or if someone does steal your phone and it's got Find My Phone on it and you know where they are, you're told not to go and approach them, not to go and do it. Or your bicycle, don't go and get it back. That's the advice. And so, you know, no matter who it is that's doing it, just as an ordinary citizen, I just feel that, you know, I don't feel secure. I don't feel my home, my valuables are as secure as they certainly did feel many years ago.
And I can argue with you in relation to what you've described and how you feel about what you've described. But for example, when we do try academically to assess the amount of crime in England and Wales, we use something called, it used to be called the British Crime Survey. It's now called the Crime Survey of England and Wales. There's a separate crime survey in Scotland. But the Crime Survey of England and Wales has actually said repeatedly that crime is falling. That when researchers go out into people's houses like your own house, and they interview you about your experiences of crime, what they demonstrate is that time after time, crime has actually fallen. I saw, again, we've mentioned him once, Nigel Farage was saying he far more trusts the police recorded crime statistics. Well, the police recorded crime statistics are the ones that are least reliable in terms of trying to assess the state of crime in Britain. All I can say is your fears are your fears. I can't do anything about that. I have lived in London myself. I don't any longer. But all I can say is that crime has fallen.
You're the psychologist, and why am I feeling like this then? If the numbers don't um, provide the evidence for it, then why am I feeling? Why are people leaving London? Why are people getting out of the city?
Well, partly it's because your fears are your fears. And it's very difficult for me to sit here in the countryside saying your fears are irrational, because your fears are rational. Your fears are what frighten you, and you're getting older, you're getting wealthier, you have more to lose. That partly will play into it as well. I mean, you and I have been in London together late at night, and we've walked home from the restaurant after we've had something to eat. We didn't particularly worry about that, though, Martin, did we? We walked quite comfortably home to your house.
Yeah, no, but I wouldn't want to be a single woman on her own in London walking across dark commons. You just don't do it. Um, you haven't done it for a long time, not just now, but you haven't done it for a long time. I mean, yeah, we were together, two men together. If I'd been on my own, I'd have been much more wary of where I was going and what I was doing. And a few glasses of wine, you get a bit of Dutch courage as well, don't you? But I just generally feel that it's it's less safe. I mean, for instance, in my streets, I don't see a police car. Think I've hardly seen a police car in the many years I've been here, patrolling around here ever, to the point I have neighbours who are paying for private security to patrol their streets every single night, 7 days a week, because they're so fed up of their houses being broken into and no one's caught and no one's convicted.
And that's exactly replicating the reaction of late Victorians to the Irish and to a problem called the ticket of leave men. These were men that had gone to prison and they get a ticket of leave, which is effectively a parole. And what did they do? There was a panic about the crime increasing in London, and there were no bobbies on the beat, or enough bobbies on the beat. And so many middle-class Londoners in the 1880s started hiring private security. And actually, Punch, you can look at the Punch cartoons. They were all about how to protect yourself from a ticket of leave man. These are not new fears, is the point I'm making. These are continuing fears of us as a nation when we experience something sudden, unexpected, something which is new. And then a number of people will use that fear to continue to make us afraid. Politicians, the mass media, sensational mass media in particular. Now, I'm not criticizing anybody, because sometimes it seems to me those fears are legitimate. All I'm saying is, if you look at the figures that we have, they tell a very different story to the one that you've been describing.
I know, listen, I know, and I think I'm hitting my head against a brick wall and we're going round in circles here. But I mean, all I know is my evidential, factual, day-to-day life in the streets that I live in, where people's cars have been, in the past couple of years, taken, and it got to the stage where not just were they being taken, and then we fitted them with all sorts of locks and stuff like that. They would then come along with low loaders with a crane and pick them up, and within 60 seconds they can take them away. And then you add in, yeah, people being assaulted or flashed at in the common, being broken into, or your house being burgled, and it's holiday time just now. And so, I'm keeping a lookout for as many houses as I can, but this is prime thieving time, and let's just see what happens. But that literally just in the past few years, that's just not that, it's always been there and it's only now that we're getting sort of flummoxed about it. Something has changed just in the past few years, that there's definitely, and it's not a perception, there is more crime because we are those soldiers.
And I think some of the changes relate to public policy, and some of the changes relate to the economy and the willingness to put money
There's no
into.
police. I don't see the police. Where are the police? I don't see any police around here.
And the police, the numbers of people recruited to the police are only now reaching the level that they were at in 2010, and so they did lose a lot of finance, and therefore they couldn't recruit. They're now trying to get recruitment levels up. But you mentioned women walking alone late at night And actually, when you listen to women's groups, they now say they're as frightened of the police because of what happened to Sarah Everard. It was a serving police officer who actually abducted, raped, and murdered her. So these solutions are not simple. These solutions have many elements to them and a number of different components, which has to take into consideration that there are legitimate fears, and how should those fears be addressed? For me, that's why I get so angry, I suppose, about the small boat stuff. The small boat stuff for me seems to be about creating a crisis that takes up a great deal of attention by the politicians. I'd far rather the politicians were taking up attention to deal with the fears that you've been describing. I want them to concentrate on that.
It's interesting the different ways into the UK now. I think for a long time it was in the backs of lorries, and that still goes on, but nowhere near as bad as it used to be. I think some of the people that we're talking about from Albania, they're actually quite prolific in terms of fake passports, those
Fake
criminals that were
passports.
coming in. Some even hired small planes on the French coast to come in the dead of night. And some, I believe now, are looking at fishing boats or even yachts. And that's interesting because I love when I can get down to the south coast. And if I'm sailing down there, around the Isle of Wight, the Solent kind of area, there aren't really any checks. I mean, you could be on a yacht coming in there, booking into Marina for a night or for a short term for a lunch or something, say. All you have to do is give your credit card details, name of the boat, that sort of thing. And you can offload as many people, quite frankly, from those boats, and they're there. There's no customs, there's no passport, there's no checks, there's no coast guards, and there's lots of ports dotted around the south of England where this could happen. I wonder if that's the next access point.
Well, I think it already is. People are already talking about. I mean, I spoke to people that I know in border security today, and the small boats are taking up a lot of attention. But there are different ways that people are now coming into the country, and they're not coming into the south coast, and they're not leaving from France. They're leaving from other countries, including Denmark. I was told today. So there are lots of ways to get into the country. I mean, my view is there are also people being sent away from the country constantly, and so there. I mean, I know there is net migration, but I just feel that this is a story that takes attention away from the bigger issues that we need to be discussing. And you know, he is Dorian. For me, Dorian Puka is just a goon. He's just he's being used. He's being used as a bogeyman to frighten everybody into believing that all these guys are making huge amounts of money and they're cocking a snook at authority. He is cocking a snook at authority,
And if you
but
look at his
he's not everyone.
if you look at his TikToks, he's got no taste. He's got no style, quite frankly. I mean, he comes from, a certain kind of style that you don't want to be part of. Just, Harry Enfield and loads of cash. It's that kind of thing. He looks quite a sad person. And conscious of our time, what do we do about organized crime? These gangsters. I mean, it comes back to the Albanians again because they seem to be quite prolific in terms of drugs. Although the one city they don't go to is Liverpool because that's kind of closed off. And maybe are the Scousers good at kicking them out or whatever it is, or is just that it's a closed market?
The Albanians, I mean, I can only speak from the exposure I've had to some Albanian organized crime group, a particular organized crime group, and they try to keep their heads down. So unlike Dorian Puka, who's thumbing his nose at everybody in authority, the successful Albanian organized criminals don't flash their cash, don't live their life to the large. They're very, very under the radar because what they don't want to do is draw attention to themselves. If they feel that they have to use violence, they will use violence. Now, with Liverpool, they just could not get an inroad into Liverpool, was my understanding, because Liverpool, again, cocaine and cannabis was being sorted for a long, long time by particular groups in Liverpool, and they were able to successfully fight the Albanians off. To have actually taken over in Liverpool would have drawn too much attention to what was happening, and that doesn't suit them, which is why people like Dorian Puka is, a kind of, again, he'd never be used by an Albanian organized crime group because he would draw attention to them.
Well, we have done previous podcast on Liverpool where it was part of, we're talking about crime families. So Liverpool has quite a strong kind of clan grouping there, doesn't it?
It really does. And I'm kind of interested at the minute about all the material that's coming out of Australia about matriarchs running organized crime groups. And I thought that was really interesting too. Rather than men running it, the women were running it. And I thought, again, that might be something for a future podcast.
Let's just round this off. Just one final thing. Just on cleaning asylum. For instance, Albania wants to be part of the EU and it's kind of, going through the process. Is Albania a genuine country that we should be worried about sending someone back to, or someone who claims asylum not to be sent back to? I mean, surely the whole point of Albania now, and you know it much more than I do, is that it's becoming a very civilized state.
I think Albania is a wonderful place. And I think Edi Rama, the prime minister, has got a lot of skill and quality. And in fact, he's already said, look, I'll take everybody who's Albanian in British jails, bring them back. I'll take them. He really wants to establish the fact that this Albania is a civilized country that has emerged from the dictatorship of Enver Hoxha and is suitable for entry to the European Union. And the Albanians are coming over 4 times a year. Members of the Albanian government are coming over 4 times a year to discuss border security issues with Britons about border security. So the Albanians are really trying to solve the problem as well as how the British solved the problem. And all credit to them.
And it's a very pretty country as well. I've been to Albania a few times. And if you're thinking of a last minute holiday deal, I think you get quite a good price in
I
Albania.
thought we weren't doing commercials.
We did that, and this morning, a few months ago, I said to Simon Calder, I said, can you get me the cheapest deal in Europe? And it was Albania. And he went down there and, he loves it. That Albania, Montenegro, those kind of coastal countries, beautiful. It's like Greece pretty much, isn't it?
It really is. It's beautiful, and I have a particular fondness for Tirana. I like Tirana. So yeah, Albania, and I do think we just have to keep a sense of proportion about people like Dorian Puka, about the Boomerang gangs, and we just have to reflect. Britain isn't going to hell in a handcart.
I'll put his picture up again if you're watching on YouTube of Dorian Puka. If you see someone like him in your street walking up and down, just be aware he's a prolific burglar. We know who he is, and he's not watching this because he's out, spending his money somewhere in some deeply, unstylish place. But David, thank you so much. I think we've been round the houses on this one. And I think
as long as he's not been in the houses with this one.
Well, of course, going by your numbers, he doesn't exist because, we don't have such a big problem.
That's not what I argued.
For the time being, Professor Wilson, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Good talking to you again.